Welcome back, Be Good community. Today, we're going to talk about what I believe is one of the most important aspects of effective teaching. And remember, I like to say teachers are leaders and leaders are teachers. And so this applies both to school leadership, but in the classroom as well. And we're going to focus on it for the classroom, and that is clarity, clear communication. What am I teaching? Why is it important? When I've worked with administrators, one of the things that continues to bug them, and I'll talk about this on another video, is feeling unqualified to evaluate teachers. Jumping in and wondering, what do I need to be focused on? There's so many things. They look at something like the Danielson model, or they look at something like a teacher evaluation tool, and they think to themselves, how do I actually view all of those things in a classroom visit? Well, you can't. The best students, when evaluating or surveying students, interviewing students across the board since 2001 all the way till 2024, consistently what they say is that the best teachers are very clear about the objectives, learning outcomes, what we're supposed to be getting from this lesson. And the best teachers make sure that the kids get it. So I want to give an example of a teacher who I worked with, call him Mr. Hempstead, great teacher, was teaching AP level, advanced placement level history. And he had trusted me enough to ask me if I could come into his classes and see what was going on. And I said, what do you mean? What's going on? He was teaching the students. He was doing his thing. He had his lesson plans. Students seemed to engage, but there was something missing. He said they just weren't where he thought they should be. And he wanted to see if someone had an outside, a perspective that he could take a look at. Well, I went into his class and I would join his class about twice a day for 2 weeks. I told him, I said, let's do a deep dive. I'll try to, sit in there. And I would go to the end of class and the beginning of the class. And what I found from there was that the students are very engaged, and Mr. Hempstead was teaching away. I mean, he was a great lecturer. I found myself sometimes getting so enraptured and wrapped up in his conversation, what he was talking about, that sometimes I was forgetting my job at that point in time. Students were engaged, but what I noticed was that there were about 5 or 6 students who were really driving the conversation. Every single class, and most he'd be having a great lecture, interactive lecture, of course, but there's about 5 or 6 students who are really driving the conversation. And then by the end of class, I said, I wonder if everyone walks away with the same understanding of what's most important about these classes. So I began asking. As soon as the class would end, I would just go to a few different students and say, hey, so what were the big takeaways from that lesson? What do you think were the key points or most important parts from that lesson? And what became very clear was I was getting multiple answers from students. I was getting a lot of different answers from students. And when I went back for a conversation with Mr. Hempstead was actually very clear on what he was hoping they were learning, or what he wanted them to learn from his lessons. He knew what the learning intention was, but somehow that was being lost with the students. And so this is why, and what we found out was, okay, so here maybe is why when you give your assessments, here's maybe why when you're giving your assessments, the students aren't doing as well as you wanted, because they're enjoying the class. They enjoy Mr. Hempstead, but they're not always clear exactly on what the most important points they're supposed to take away and then really reestablish and look back on. Had this conversation with Mr. Hempstead and said, hey, this could be wrong, but here's something to take a look at. And he used that information to actually make some big leaps in the student learning in his class. And there were simple fixes. For what he did was make sure at the beginning of class, he had a few different questions at the beginning of class. They said, you should be able to answer these questions by the end of this class. Then in the middle of the lesson, he would ask kids to answer those questions or similar questions to those in the middle of class to see, what have you learned so far? So what do you think so far? And then at the end of class, he would make time again for them to make a reflection on how they would answer or make outlines for how they would answer those questions. So what he was doing is at the beginning, at the middle, and at the end of class, coming back to the key points, reminding students to get clear And he was providing that clarity. And what it also made him do is by doing that and practicing that, he also became more clear on the strategies he was using to teach and how he was teaching in his own classroom. None of those were my suggestions. These are things that he came to on his own just by focusing on clarity, that clear communication. So why is it so important? Well, we've all had moments where we've thrown out information, where there's an information dump that needs to happen in this class, and I'm going to hit the kids with it because we got to get through this curriculum. But effective teaching isn't really about throwing material at students, nor is it as a leader throwing material at teachers, but we'll get to that later. But clear communication is really about breaking down something that might seem complex or complicated into these manageable chunks, and then coming back to over and over again, what are the most important points? What are the things we need to learn? So there's a role of patience. So patience is necessary if we're going to be clear, because patience plays a crucial role here. When students are uncertain and they're tempting to move quickly, or they think that they'll catch up later, but the truth is that if we don't take the time to address the confusion in the classroom, if we don't take those times to check for understanding, and checking for understanding is what ensures some clarity. And there's so many great resources for checking for understanding. Dylan Willem is probably my favorite, but also Doug Lemov has some great tools for that. But there's so many out there. Checking for understanding is so crucial because it makes people stop and just see, what did my kids know? Are they actually learning? Because I'm on a roll. Like, we've all been on a roll before just to find out that our students weren't understanding what we wanted them to understand. We've all been a student in a classroom before where the teacher was teaching their butt off, doing everything, but us as a student, we weren't paying attention and we weren't actually putting our side of it in. So the checks for understanding will reveal that earlier on. And it takes patience because people are like, but I've already said this, but I don't want to go back again and do that. But as great teaching, we know that that's part of it. We know that if we go slow, we can go fast later. Go slow in the beginning. Check for understanding, get clarity, and you'll have students who are learning, and that learning builds on top of each other, and so you can go faster later on, but it takes patience at first. Another way is it fosters a safe learning environment. When you can get clear, when students know that what you're saying is what they have to learn, when they know that what you're teaching is in fact what's going to show up later on their assessments. When we communicate with patience and clarity, we give students sort of the permission to fully engage, to ask questions, and not feel embarrassed when they don't understand something, because they also know that we're committed to making sure that they've got this. When we are committed to clear communication, students are also more likely to advocate for themselves and to ask clarifying questions, which we know is so essential. We know no matter how clear we can be, so much of this journey will depend on, is the teacher creating an environment where students will engage, where students are not afraid of making mistakes and become much more productive and support themselves and advocate for themselves in terms of their learning. This creates an environment that's full of trust and has some psychological safety to it. And then the true goal of teaching, which is always to explain that, teaching isn't about just showing knowledge, right? It's about facilitating learning. And at the end of the day, teaching isn't a demonstration of everything that I know. It's about whether or not the kids have learned. And so I used to tell kids all the time, I said, make sure you're asking your teachers questions because it's their job to answer questions. And so much of teaching is about finding a way that is clear, thoughtful, and meaningful so that every student has the greatest possibility of learning if they bring their effort to it. What I think so much of the time is that if we're just moving through things and if we're just assuming that we're clear, we're not actually teaching. Teaching is not just spouting information. Teaching is about taking the time to make sure people understand what it is you're asking of them and finding out where the mistakes are, finding out where the gaps are, and trying to fill those holes and helping people to become better learners. And we only do that if we're constantly coming back to clarity. Most of our relationship issues, whether it be in school or in our personal lives, are for a lack of clarity, are because we're not communicating clearly with each other, letting people know what's essential and what we need to have happen. And as administrators, the point that I had at the beginning, if you're coming in to look for something really important, if you're coming in to just look for something that you and the teacher will probably agree on, that's not controversial at all, it's clarity. Is what the kids are supposed to be learning clear to them? Is it clear to me if I'm here at the beginning of the class? And are there steps in that class throughout it, whether it be 45 minutes or 90 minutes, that the teacher is taking to make sure that the kids remain clear? Are there ways in which the teacher is going about finding out if they need to reteach something in the moment, if they need to reiterate a point in the moment? And how is the teacher gaining clarity in that space? And how is that happening before the kids leave? Are we making sure that before they leave, they're clear on what we've been teaching them? Now, I said there's a different video where we're going to talk about administrators and school leadership and clarity, which is so important. But we can think about the staff meeting the same way. A few things are important. We know we're going to have to repeat them. How do we check that people are clear before they leave a meeting, before they leave a staff meeting? This skill of looking for clarity and clear communication and checking for understanding goes way past just the classroom. It can go into our personal life, into our professional life, and that's why it's integral to good teaching and instruction. So let's remember that clarity, clear communication isn't just a skill. It's a vital part of the teaching process, right? It's about meeting students where they are. It's about taking the time to check for understanding. It's about creating an environment where people feel confident and capable for asking questions. And that's how we help students succeed. That's how we help anyone who we're trying to teach, learn, and grow. Be good. If you like that video, be sure to visit our website at begoodleadership.org, where you will find resources for every type of educational professional there is. Learn how to teach better, learn how to lead better, and to cement stronger relationships. Be Good Leadership, where we're building school communities that focus on performance as well as deep humanity. Please be sure to check out so many free resources that we have for you. Sign up for our newsletter and be good.